Hello everybody, welcome to Neuroscience-Sensory Systems. This is our first meeting and I hope that you will enjoy this course and it will be a productive semester. You will learn about the interesting things of sensory systems of your body, and to understand the sensory systems you need to understand the neuroscience. Okay, so how the brain works, how the nervous system works. So a big part of this course will deal with that, how different types of sensations are processed in the nervous system, okay, and interact with each other. So that is another thing we'll talk about during this course. And since this is a sensory system course, first thing what you need to know is what is sensation, what is perception, what is the difference between these two. So that is today, and then we will move forward. We'll talk about sensory stimulus. The stimulus can come from outside. Usually stimulus comes from outside. However, stimulus can be created or generated inside the body. For example, the pain stimulus can come from outside of the body, right? So if something bites you or scratches you, so that is the stimulus from outside, external stimulus. However, if inflammation occurs in your wall of the stomach or liver, you will feel pain. So that is the stimulus being generated inside the body. Make sense? So that's the internal stimulus. Then we'll talk about the background of sensory perception, history of sensory perception. In this part, we'll talk a little bit about the philosophy of sensory perceptions, and then we'll talk about two very important topics. One is sensory adaptation and another is sensory threshold of sensation. And then we'll talk about early work in neuroscience, important landmark works of in neuroscience. As this course will deal with a lot of brain functions, it is very important that you understand how the brain works. So we'll spend some time to discuss that topic, how your brain works in general, how your brain is structured. Uh, then we'll move forward. Then we'll talk about the requirements of sensory perception. Okay, so let's first talk about the sensation and perception. Sensation is the first feeling when a stimulus arrives, and the first thing that you realize is the sensation, immediate awareness that something has happened. However, you don't know yet what is that. Make sense? So when something touches your skin or body surface, you immediately recognize that something has touched your skin. However, you don't know what was that. So that is the sensation, immediate awareness that something has happened. Then immediately after that, what happens? You realize that touch came from someone else's finger, or kiss, or metal, or wood, or an insect set on your skin, so landed on your skin. So you can um, realize that, but that comes after uh, immediate feeling of touch, right? So that is the perception. So perception always comes after sensation. And for perception, you need to acquire information about the surrounding environment, and uh, uh, perception is useful to acquire information about the surrounding environment and our situation. However, to process the perception, you need um, uh, to involve the higher brain areas. Okay, for example, when you get uh, touched by a piece of metal and a piece of wood, you can discriminate. How you can discriminate? From your experience, right? Your memory, and that experience or memory is stored in your brain, higher brain areas, right? And when you um, get touch again, then the memory system gets activated, right? And that helps you to understand what that touch was. So that is the perception, right? So for perception, you need to involve other brain structures, uh, but for sensation, you don't need to engage, or your brain doesn't need to, involve multiple uh, structures. So perception is more like a complicated process than the sensation, and comes after the sensation. Uh, to get the sensation, you need the stimulus, and as I mentioned, that the stimulus can come from outside, that is the external stimulus. For example, if some thing lands on your skin or touches your skin from outside, that is, or scratches from outside, that is the external stimulus. Internal stimulus, like pain that produced in the internal body organs or muscles, right? So two types of stimulus. Now, um, another way we divide the stimulus uh, by looking at the uh, location of the stimulus. One type of stimulus is called the distal stimulus, and another is called the proximal stimulus. So here you see, we know that sun is the source, the main source of light on the earth, right? So the sunlight falls on the objects, and then it is reflected to your eyes. And you see here a good example of proximal and distal stimuli. This is you, and this is your opponent. You guys are playing racquetball, and you keep eyes on this racquetball, right? So the sunlight is falling on the racket ball as well as the opponent, and from the racket ball, this light is reflected to your eye. So this is you, your eye receives the light from the racket ball. So this ball is the distal stimulus, and from the racket ball, the light, which is the electromagnetic energy, the waves, enter into your eye, and activates the receptors, photoreceptors, right, inside your eye. You know that in your retina of the eye, you have the photoreceptors. They receive the electromagnetic waves or light waves. So light wave is the one that is activating the receptors, right, arriving, entering into your eyes and activating the receptors. So light is the proximal stimulus. Make sense? So in this case, the object, the ball or racket, or the opponent, these are all distal stimuli, and the light waves arriving and hitting the receptors inside your eye, those light waves are proximal stimuli. Similarly, at the same time, when the racket ball hits the racket, a sound is produced. That means the waves in the air are created, and the racket ball is the distal stimulus. Also, in case of auditory stimulus, and the air waves that arrive into your ears and activate the receptors, sound receptors inside your ear. These waves, sound waves, are the proximal stimuli. Make sense? So proximal stimuli arrives and activates the receptors in your body. Make sense? And distal stimuli are the objects away from the body, the source of the proximal stimuli. And then from the receptors, signal travels to the brain. And in your brain, you have different areas. For example, from the eye, signal goes to the visual part of the brain. From your ear, signal goes to the auditory part of the brain. And from your hand, the somatosensory touch signal and pressure signals go to the somatosensory part of the brain, right? And those signals are processed in different areas or different parts designated for processing those signals. Okay, so that's all about the stimulus. Okay. Now, to understand the sensory systems, you need to understand the structure of the brain. Human brain consists of hundreds of billions of cells, and each cell is a neuron. So the cells of the brain are the neurons, and neurons are connected to each other. So this is one neuron, and this is the cell body, and a neuron has processes. These short processes are called dendrites. Dendrites are usually multiple and short, as well as they have branches. And from the other side of the cell body, this long single one is called the axon. Okay, and this is the axon terminal. These are the axon terminals, and this is another neuron, and this is the synapse where the neurons talk to each other. Okay, so synapse. And each neuron is connected to other neurons by about 10,000 synapses. So just think that on average a single neuron can create 10,000 connections. So hundreds of billions of cells or neurons, and each of them on average creates about 10,000 synapses or connections. That make the brain extremely powerful. You know that human brain is the most powerful object on the earth to our knowledge, and not only that, it is the most mysterious and the most unknown organ of the body. Still we are trying to understand the brain structure and functions. Although we know almost everything about other body organs, brain is still heavily unexplored. Neuroscientists they demand that they know about 20 to 30% of brain functions. However, probably we know less than that, right? So it is very mysterious, however very powerful um, object on the earth. Often, people say that rocket science. However, just think that your brain is the source of all the sciences, right? So neuroscience is the most complicated, most powerful, and most um, interesting uh, field. Anyway, so not only those things make the brain powerful. Another very important thing, that is the synapses are not stable, not fixed, highly flexible. That means new synapses are being created, and also some old synapses are being deleted or removed. So that change is occurring every time, in every event when you experience something new. Like even when you just while you are watching TV, every scene is creating new synapses, and when you move from one room to another, one surrounding to another, new synapses are being created, and everything is being sent to the area of the brain where the memory is consolidated, or the event is stored as your memory. We know that, right? Like if I ask you what are the things you did today, you can memorize a lot of those things. So that tells that everything is being recorded, and during that every event, new synapses are being created in the brain. So that is called the plasticity of the brain, um, and that is a very interesting, very dynamic, and because of that your brain is extremely powerful. Okay, and as I told you, the first thing that should happen is uh, the stimulus must stimulus must be produced, and that stimulus could be a light or a sound, or uh, food molecules, whatever. The stimulus must be produced and activate the receptors. So next is the receptor, and when the stimulus arrives, the receptors receive the stimulus, and some changes occur inside the receptor. Okay, and that is called the transduction. the changes that occurs inside the receptor upon the arrival of the stimulus. And the transduction does what? Converts the stimulus to electrical signal. Electrical signal. So the stimulus that is received by the receptors are converted to electrical signals, and that is the transduction. And this transduction is extremely important, because without signal transduction, the signal will not be sent to the brain. You know that from the receptors the signal is sent to the brain. However, your nervous system can transmit the signal by electrical means. So whatever the stimulus, it could be mechanical, it could be chemical, it could be electrical, whatever the stimulus is, it must be converted to electrical signal. And once the electrical signal is produced, then the signal can be sent to the brain through the nerves. Okay, and that's why signal transduction is extremely important, okay, inside the receptors. Uh, in 1866, a German scientist, Hermann, he first proposed the idea that two types of signals, or the two pathways of signals, are working to process a sensory stimulus. One is bottom up, and you already know that I mentioned that from the receptors. For example, this is your retina of your eye, and these are the photoreceptors, right? Receive the light stimulus, and transduction occurs in the receptors, and from the receptors the signal is taken to the brain. You already know that. And this is bottom up, going upwards, ascending towards the brain, right? And during this, transmission of signal at different locations, the signal is relayed along the ascending pathways. Anyway, so this is the bottom up, and your brain receives that signal and gives you the perception, right? However, you remember I mentioned that other brain structures are involved in perception, and those are the higher brain areas. For example, these areas record or store memory. So to perceive something, you need previous memory, otherwise your brain will not be able to tell what is that. So this is higher area, and this is the area where the signal first arrives, okay, and you gets the sensation. For example, this area gives sensation, and then what happens, the higher areas send signal to this area, lower area. Makes sense? And then you get the perception. So this is top down, going downwards from the upper areas. Not only that, for example, these are the lower areas, right? So when the signal moves up, bottom up signal, and this area, for example, has received the signal, and if this area thinks that the signal is too strong, could be, harmful or not helpful, then this area can do what? Can send signal back to the earlier areas and tell these areas that inhibit or block some signals, slow down, okay, your output. So you see, this is also top-down signal, and that can go all the way down to the receptors. In some cases, we know that the signal to control the ascending or bottom-up signal, to limit or reduce or enhance from the upper areas, signal can also go to the lower areas or earlier centers. So this is top down, and by the action of these two, your perception is is processed or improved, gets better. Okay, if it is too strong, top down signal will try to inhibit or try to block or filter some signal. If it is too weak, then enhancing signal can also go down to the earlier areas and stimulate that area. So this is very interesting, and your brain has both bottom up and top down connections, and by both your signal is polished, filtered or enhanced. How many senses are there? As I mentioned, that commonly people mention or say that there are 5 senses, and those are very common: vision or sight, audition or hearing, and olfaction or smell, gustation or taste. Those 4 belong to special senses. Okay, vision or sight, audition or hearing, gustation, taste, and olfaction or smell. And for each you have its own system. Visual system processes vision, auditory system processes audition or hearing, sound, gustatory system processes taste, and olfactory system processes the smell. Okay, and the receptors are located in the peripheral organs. For vision, the peripheral organs are your eyes, and receptors are located inside the eyes. For audition, the peripheral organs are your 2 ears, and receptors are located inside the ears. For gustation, tongue is the main organ, and the taste receptors are located inside the taste buds of your tongue, and olfactory receptors are located in the olfactory epithelium inside the nose. So nose is the organ, okay, peripheral organ. So peripheral organs are mainly to house the receptors, okay, and receptors for special senses are very localized, only located in those specific or special organs. That's why these are special senses. Another common sensation, somatosensation. You all know somatosensation. That includes pain, touch, temperature sensations in your body. However, for somatosensations, you don't have any specific organs. Receptors are distributed throughout the body. For example, pain, touch, temperature, those receptors are everywhere on the body surface or skin, right? So skin is the organ. However, skin covers the whole body, and you have those sensations or receptors, somatosensory receptors everywhere in the body. Not only in the body surface, also inside the body you have those receptors. That's why you feel some of those sensations inside. So those are five common senses. However, there are additional sensations. We know that, for example, inside your ear you have auditory receptors for sound. However, you also have the receptors to detect the acceleration or tilt of your head. Those are located inside the semicircular canals inside the ear. So acceleration or tilting of the body, those information your brain needs to balance the body position, right? So also in your joints and muscle spindles you have proprioceptors, okay, to detect the movement of the body. So those are a few examples of other sensations and their receptors, okay.